Hi folks, Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to contrast and look at the difference between birth rates, procreation in societies in Africa, polygamous societies where it's quite common for one woman to have multiple children by multiple partners, something we still see in black societies across the West today. The United States is a good example. It's not unusual there to see black women with 5 children with 5 different partners, or from 5 different partners, and also the cousin marriage societies. Now, the reason I mention these two is that all the growth rates in births, the high birth rates in the world, are coming from these two groups, the polygamous groups in and around Africa and so on, or even some of the Pacific Islanders, and also the marriage or cousin marriage, intimate family marrying brothers and sisters marrying, for goodness sakes, which are places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, and so on, parts of the Middle East, and even parts of Islamic Africa. So now, if you look at somewhere like Afghanistan, that 6, 7, 8 births per woman, and then you look at the places in Africa where the polygamous type structure, where the idea of the nuclear family, one woman, one man, it just doesn't really exist in any widespread sense. Then these two areas where the 4 to 5 births per woman in those places. So the reality is, when you compare it to the West, where across the West the average is say 1.8, or even Asian societies now, where say Japan and China and South Korea as an example, where the birth rates there are below replacement level. And even in areas where, say, places like Singapore, where the government has been quite active in encouraging procreation, even in those societies, the procreation rate still struggles to meet or exceed replacement level. So we've got and again, they tend to have at least a closer affinity, the nuclear family in those sort of places. So we've got cousin marriage societies and polygamous society, openly polygamous societies, and they're the only places where populations are increasing. By the same token, they're also the poorest places in the world. So the relationship there is clear. Now, so what you might say, but the issue is that out of these surplus populations, the globalist cabal, without our consent or agreement, is transferring vast numbers of people from these areas into the West. And for the most part, they're bringing their cultural habits with them. So if you look at, say, cousin marriage in England, but I'll use Pakistan, Bangladesh as the example, but or the Indian subcontinent, just as a whole, cousin marriages are, particularly amongst the Islamic people, cousin marriages are particularly widespread. Are they as widespread as they would be if they were in Pakistan or Bangladesh? Probably not, but still widespread. Now, I think you need to be a 3rd or 4th cousin before you can be reasonably confident of no deformities or minimal likelihood of deformities. And I think by the time you get to 5th cousin marriages, then it's pretty much as if you were marrying a rando person anywhere else. But so you have to be quite distant from the source on this. But cousin marriages, brother sister procreation, all this sort of stuff is quite widespread. And if you look at the deformities and the children needing very intensive medical care for their lifetimes, then and this has to be supplied by the white taxpayers. Then and you look at, for example, black people in the United States, where again it's quite normal for women to have multiple children from multiple different men. They're clearly importing their habits, their cultural habits, and these habits last for a long time. Even 3rd generation born, 4th generation born Pakistanis and so on are still doing the cousin marriage thing. Now, their arguments are, well, we want to keep all the assets of the family together in the the inner family, and we want to keep our genetic bloodlines pure. These sorts of things. So there's that sort of talk used to justify it. But the reality is that there's a very high level of rate of deformity in those sorts of relationships, and vast resources are needed to keep these children alive. Now, just to add to this, in Islam, people that are mentally deficient or physically deformed are under the direct protection of Allah, the direct protection of Allah. So if you harm them, then you're damned forever and all eternity and this sort of stuff. So the idea of euthanizing, people that are that deformed and unable to survive without assistance, that sort of, then you can't really do that, as in, within the religious confines of what's considered to be acceptable behavior. So because of the high quality of Western medical care, these deformed people are surviving, with 24-hour care and vast resources are surviving, which means there are a lot of them around. You see them around Australia now. There are vast numbers of these deformed children and people being wheeled around in wheelchairs and from third world countries and so on. Why they would be allowed to migrate to Australia is quite beyond me. But there you go. But again, even second, third, fourth generations are still behaving in that way. So why that's allowed is quite beyond me, but it is. So we need to understand that just on a rate of migration, rate of procreation type mathematics, and this is fairly simple mathematics, the white people of the world are going to be in the white countries at least, and anywhere else, of course, reduced to a minority in all the white countries. And one can only wonder what the legislation is going. There's enough legislation already to contain and oppress and control and intimidate and arbitrarily incarcerate white people. They're prevented from employment and goodness knows what now in Western countries. So how is that going to look when white people are in an absolute minority, which is, I think, in every Western country, somewhere between 20 and 35 years away? I'll be long dead by then, so it's not going to be my problem necessarily. But the effect of it I'm seeing all around me now. So again, I think it's only going to get worse. I don't think the problem is going to go away. The procreation rate in these countries, again, because of Western medicine and this sort of thing, these people are surviving at rates that would be hitherto unthinkable. The African woman needed to have 6 children because only 1 or 2 would survive because of famines and sicknesses and all sorts of things. The same goes in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. The survival rate was quite low. Infant mortality was 50, 60, 70%. But now that's changed. Infant mortality in these places has dropped to 25%. So you have 7 children, at least 5 of them are going to survive. And so we're seeing population explosions in these areas that not only are currently underway, but if you look at the amount of children, say, under the age of 5 years old in these places, that in another 15 years, they're going to be 20 years old and there will be gazillions of them. And given the current maniacal desire of the globalist cabal to move these peasants into the West, then we can only assume the pool of people that can be moved and want to move or can be agitated and stirred up to move by the globalist cabal and the NGO flunkies and so on will only increase. So you could be looking, just out of Africa alone, you could be looking at between 50 and 75 million people in 15 or so years that are hanging around with nothing to do and have armies of agitators running around saying, hey, go to the West and streets are paved with gold. And so they'll be going in vast numbers. So unless something changes, we're looking at a population Armageddon, and the first world will be turned into a third world, and there'll be shitholes everywhere. Perhaps at that stage, the globalists will own everything. And so no matter where in the world you go, no matter what you need to do, whether it's food or housing or medical care, whatever, the globals will own everything, and thus you can only go to them to get to what you want. So their profits are protected, their risk is zero, and maybe that's where we're heading. But I just wanted to highlight that the only places where population are increasing are polygamous societies and cousin marriage societies. You've been a Tassus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.